welcome to our People and Productivity series and this introduction tutorial. Do your people keep you in the black or do they err towards the red? Now, isn't that the question? Or perhaps you've never thought about it until just now. Well, let me share with you a few key facts that tell a very powerful story. Only 35% of full-time workers are highly engaged. This means that up to 2/3 of your workforce, that's as much as 65% of your team or department, are either not fully engaged or are actively disengaged. This means they are not working at maximum productivity. Speaking of productivity, 1/3 of Australia's workforce falls below the national productivity average, costing businesses up to $41.3 billion every year. Only 23% of the Australian workforce is highly productive, and only half of Australia's 11.5 million employees believe they are even in the right line of work. Did you know that Australia's productivity rate has dropped right off? We were going well for a decade or so, but in this last decade, well, since around the year 2000, has seen a continuing decline. Now, the most common measure of productivity performance is labour productivity, which measures output per unit of labour input. Another more comprehensive way of measuring productivity is the multi-factor productivity, or MFB. This measure includes not only labour inputs, but also capital and other sources of productivity. Both these measures show ongoing declines, so no matter which way you measure productivity, there is no doubt that it is in serious trouble. Increasing the rate of productivity growth is central to rising living standards and sustainable economic growth. This introductory tutorial will cover your people as the only true competitive edge your business has, workplace skills as the key driver of productivity improvement, what this People and Productivity program covers and why, how the program works and the coaching support available, executing strategy for organisational success and the tools needed to do this well as a frontline manager or supervisor, the factors of production and the importance of human capital for bottom line performance and competitive advantage. Explore the real value of employee engagement, what the research tells us, brand awareness and the organisation's line of sight, job satisfaction, employee engagement and productivity, and how the following tutorials will help you achieve all three as a leader and frontline manager. Of course, the figures are concerning, not just to individual organisations and CEOs who are seeing their profits even further eroded away, but also to government and industry bodies, as much of the negative commentary around productivity tends to blame government policies and/or excessive business regulations. There is much rhetoric engaged in the cause and effect of various policies and economic decisions on productivity and what actions to take, but you'll be relieved to know that it's not my intent to pursue them here. While I have no doubt there is an urgent need for some serious and challenging long-term policy decisions to be made, I'm not going to add to the debate in this People and Productivity program. Instead, I want to focus on what we can do as business owners, managers and supervisors to halt the decline of productivity at the local level and ensure that at least your own company implements strategies to grow productivity and so grow profits and long-term business sustainability. It's interesting to note that the Australian government's much touted and quoted report on the Asian century notes that most of what is required to lift Australia's productivity is in the hands of individuals, especially managers of businesses. It goes on to say that productivity will emerge through innovation in business processes within firms and more sophisticated relationships. To truly unlock productivity, we need workplace leadership, skills, and a culture that encourages innovation and employee engagement. The single biggest factor here is twofold: the engaged employee and the manager as an efficient, effective leader of people. Studies have shown that Australia ranks well behind other advanced economies in management skills and capability, particularly when it comes to engaging workforces and instilling a talent mindset. It seems to me that many managers just don't get it. In this decade where all the factors you need to run a successful business are literally at your fingertips, a click away, businesses are truly at the hard end of the competitive stick. It has become almost impossible to identify a competitive edge that is outside of people. In fact, people, the human capital of the organisation, are now and finally the only real competitive edge any business has in this new global economy. It is your people that make the difference between a good business and a great business. It's your people who quite literally have it in their collective power to make or break a business. A bit melodramatic, you might think? No, I'm afraid it's true. Yet many organisations act as though this is not the case. They treat their people with disdain. They use them and then discard them. How does your organisation treat its people? When I talk to organisations about their bottom line, they know they must do something, but attending to their people is just not on their radar. Even when I begin to discuss it with them, their eyes glaze over and they start thinking about who's going to win the footy on the weekend. I'm not sure what it is about people management, but as soon as you mention it, well, the interest is lost. Suggest a new widget or the latest gadget for upping the productivity of the business and they're in. Suggest that the problem lies with their people. And while there's plenty of affirmative negativity around, they can tell you just what a useless bunch they are. There is no value attached to the people proposition. No acknowledgement that with some help and support, these people, these employees, can turn the business around. So who exactly are we talking about here? The two groups of people who are best placed to have maximum impact on the organisation's performance are the frontline managers and supervisors and the employees. Workplace skills are a key driver of productivity improvement. Employees need to have the work skills to do their job, and frontline managers and supervisors need to be engaged, involved, and committed to the concept of employee engagement and the direct link this has to increased productivity. This means we need to take time to actually develop and train our frontline managers and supervisors, and that's what this program is all about. Giving those frontline managers, supervisors, and even the HR team that supports them the key or critical skills to get the job done. So this program will introduce you to some key leadership skills and the skills required to shape a positive, committed workplace culture, build highly productive teams, and drive people performance. This program will give you the skills, knowledge, and tools you need to value, motivate, and drive people performance so you and your company can be confident of a positive and sustainable future with a strong business growth year on year. Now let me tell you how this online program works. As you can see on your screen, there are 15 core tutorials in the program, and each one deals with a different topic related to the necessary skill sets that frontline managers, supervisors, and HR professionals need in order to most effectively manage their most precious asset, their people, and increase productivity. Each video is designed to be a standalone asset, so you don't need to do them in any particular order, and if you know the topic well, then you don't need to do it at all. It's totally up to you and what you need to learn in order to get the most out of your people. This program is also supported by a learning coach who is on hand to assist you. Your coach is available to discuss what you learn as you go, and they're also on hand to help you implement these new skills and solve problems and deal with issues as they come up. Please don't forget to give the office a call to organise a coaching call at a time that best suits you so you can get the most out of this program. You can also interact with others in the program and find out from them what works and what doesn't, as well as share your own tips and tools with your colleagues. Your coach can explain how this can work for you. Below the tutorials, you will also find some complementary materials that you can elect to view or not as you progress through the program. You will find additional readings and research articles, as well as processes, tools, and templates that you can use with your own team in the workplace. So there's heaps of information to help you get the most out of your people. The final point I would like to mention about the program is accreditation. Now, once you've successfully completed the program, you will receive a certificate of completion. But if you would like a more formal accreditation that leads to a qualification, well, this option is available as well. For those of you who value learning and recognition of learning, this program aligns with a unit of competence from the Diploma of Management. So if you would like a credit towards this diploma, then all you have to do is show us how you've applied and used what you've learned on the job in the workplace. It's that easy. If you're interested in gaining a unit credit for the Diploma of Management or the Diploma of Human Resources Management, then ask a CA Learning customer service rep or your coach and they will be able to assist you. Right, now let's get back to the program and the very first thing a manager needs to get his or her head around, and that's the organisation's strategy. The ability to execute strategy is central to strategic and organisational success. Good plans fail because they are poorly implemented. Yet it's the people in organisations, the line managers, supervisors, and employees who implement these plans. People are the key to successful implementation of strategy. In order to effectively execute strategy, an organisation must first off allocate and align its human resources with its vision, goals, and strategies. Line managers and supervisors play a critical role in this. In order to execute strategy well, an organisation needs to monitor and manage 4 aspects of its workforce. It needs to monitor and manage its outcomes and objectives, and the deliverables it needs its workforce to deliver, that is, its goals and objectives. It needs to monitor and manage its culture and mindset, that is, the norms, behaviours, beliefs, thinking and expectations that shape how its workforce behaves and performs. It needs to monitor and manage its work-related competencies, that is, the skills, knowledge and abilities of its workforce. And finally, to execute strategy well, an organisation needs to manage and monitor its leadership behaviour and the extent to which leaders walk the talk. The diagram on your screen sets out the impact of workforce strategy on organisational strategy execution, and you can see that central to this diagram are those leadership and workforce behaviours and competencies and the workforce mindset and culture that drive workforce success. For decades, managers have wrestled with the increasingly important challenge of organising the workforce in the most effective way possible. Adding more workers and capital has reached the point of diminishing returns. Value is now created by the productivity gains that come from workforce innovation and more sophisticated people management. As researchers note in their report Matching People with Jobs, a new era in human capital management is approaching. Value increasingly comes from boosting the productivity of individual workers and from greater workforce innovation. By achieving the most productive possible combinations of workers and work, companies can find a lasting source of competitive advantage. Deloitte's, in their well-known report Culture and Structure Eat Strategy for Breakfast, note that employee behaviour is the lead indicator of strategy execution. So, an organisation should aim to align the behaviours of its employees with the organisation's strategy. In fact, the international firm Watson White Worldwide suggests that the primary reason for organisational profitability is the effective management of human capital, and they note that the effective integrated human capital management can result in a 47% increase in market value, while the top 10 enjoyed a whopping 391% return on investment in management of their human capital, that is, their employees. A Towers Perrin Talent report noted that there are clear links between respondents' level of engagement, their focus on customers, and aspects of their organisation's financial and operational performance across a number of areas. And just in case there is any remaining doubt about the importance of people in successful strategy execution, well, Breakley and Meister note that there are strong correlations between the activities of training leaders and excellence in business performance. In fact, this report goes on to show that companies with the best educational organisations reported significantly better revenue and profit growth via productivity measured by sales per employee 27% greater, revenue growth 40% higher, and net growth 50% greater. Okay, so we know that there is a clear link between people management performance and productivity that is reflected in the organisation's bottom line. So now I'd like to focus for a few minutes on just what this means and where people or human capital sit on the balance sheet. So let's look at this diagram of organisational assets and capital that sets out the relationship between intellectual capital and organisational capital factors of production. Now, it's a bit complex, but bear with me because it really does illustrate just how important your employees are as assets to the business. As you can see from the diagram, the organisation's capital is both intellectual and organisational. And if we focus on the intellectual capital that comes from people, well, the first box in the top left-hand corner of your screen comprises human capital, organisational intelligence. This includes the systems and processes or standing operational procedures in the organisation. Intellectual property that is generated from people, for example, patents or brands, as well as the organisation's external relationships such as customers, suppliers, or those making up the entire supply chain and stakeholders. So as you can see, an organisation has quite a bit of intellectual capital tied up and or related to the organisation's bottom line. And if we focus back on just the human capital, or the blue box on the far left-hand side of your screen, you can see that human capital comprises knowledge capital, made up of know-how, skills, knowledge, and abilities. Emotional capital, including leaders' EI and group EI, as well as resilience and efficacy. Employee relationship capital, that is really the functionality or how the individual and network functions within the organisational framework. Employee engagement capital, this includes the engagement profile, how engaged is the workforce, and hand in hand with this is the combined commitment of the workforce. Ethics capital, which includes integrity, corporate governance, and citizenship or sense of belonging to a people, group, country. And finally, in the last box on the bottom right of your screen, we have workforce diversity capital. This is the ultimate tool for sustainable competition. So this diagram outlines visually the impact of human capital on the factors of production. Now, it stands to reason that if you want to get the best out of your human capital assets or your employees, then you need to understand how. Let's unpack this a little further and look at these key terms and what they mean. As a frontline manager or supervisor, you may recall that the factors of production or productive inputs are the resources employed to produce goods and services. They enable the production of goods and services but don't become part of the finished product or service. Raw materials and fuel are not a factor of production as they are transformed and incorporated into the finished product. Factors of production include things such as land, capital, materials, finance, technological know-how, management, and people. For a long time, in fact almost all of the 20th century, the most important factors of production were thought of as land, capital, and materials. Yet, of all the factors of production, only human capital creates the longest lasting competitive advantage. It is people that make the difference. The significance of people in production has only become prominent in the 21st century, and with the advances in technology that have enabled a truly global economy that has resulted in a worldwide competition for almost everything. Now, if we tease out the factors of production, you can see on your diagram that these comprise organisational and intellectual capital. An organisation's capital is recorded and reported in its balance sheet. Capital consists of the assets available for use in the production generation of further assets, or the net value in the form of money or property owned by a person or business, and human resources of economic value. Traditionally, capital has been regarded as physical assets. However, over the last few decades, there has been increasing recognition of the value intangible assets make to organisational value and performance. Whereas the intellectual capital is an all-encompassing term which refers collectively to all the informational resources a company has at its disposal that can be used to drive profits, gain new customers, create new products, or otherwise grow, develop, and improve stakeholder value. Intellectual capital is considered an asset and provides a major competitive advantage. Intellectual capital comprises 4 components, as you can see on your screen, and the first of these is organisational intelligence. Organisational intelligence comprises the competencies of an organisation's work methods, policies, procedures, quality assurance systems, information systems, networks. Sometimes this is also known as instructional capital. Examples are QA, TQM, process reengineering, continuous improvement, Six Sigma, and Lean. The second component of intellectual capital is relationship capital, and this comprises things such as supplier knowledge competencies, research institutes, professional trade association knowledge. Effectively, this is recognizing that all the external networks and relationships you have as a collective organization all are holders of knowledge in their own right, and that this knowledge is of value to you, the organization. The third component of intellectual capital is intellectual property, and as we've mentioned, this includes brands, patents, trademarks, employee brand, employee value proposition, market position, and reputation. And finally then we have human capital. This is the collective skills, knowledge, capabilities, and competencies of an organization's staff. Human capital can be further divided into subsets. Knowledge capital is an essential component in human capital and is the know-how that results from the experience, information, knowledge, learning, and skills of the employees of an organisation. It may consist of technical information, as in chemical and electronics industries, or could be in the actual experience or skills acquired by individuals, as in construction or steel industries. As well as knowledge capital, there are 3 other forms of human capital that are becoming more relevant, as these may even be more important to competitive advantage. advantage. They are emotional capital, employee relationship, and employee engagement. And we'll look at each of these now. Emotional intelligence is a key component of emotional capital, both in leaders and the groups they lead. Leaders with strengths in a critical mass of 6 or more emotional intelligence competencies were far more effective than peers who lacked such strengths. For example, 87% placed in the top third for annual salary bonuses based on their business performance. Their divisions, on average, outperformed yearly revenue targets by 15 to 20%. Those executives who lacked emotional intelligence were rarely rated as outstanding in their annual performance reviews, and their divisions underperformed by an average of almost 20%. The importance of emotional intelligence to workplace leaders is demonstrated in the graph from Goldman on your screen that lists the reasons why leaders fail along the horizontal axis of the graph. Similarly, emotional intelligence is just as important in work groups. The principal determining factor of the success of work groups and teams is the degree of interpersonal functionality. This functionality is predicted on the levels of emotional intelligence within the group. This diagram, developed by Jordan and Lawrence on the screen now, provides a model of the emotional intelligence abilities in teams. We'll come back to this again in future tutorials. Now, if we return to our previous diagram, the next subset of human capital that is having a growing impact on an organisation's competitive advantage is employee relationships and networks. The importance of employee relations can be summarised in this quote from the highly respected Mediation Works website that says, and I quote, "It is estimated that over 65% of performance problems result from strained relationships between employees, not from deficits in individual employees' skills or motivation." And I quote from Hull and Reid in their seminal paper, Simply the Best Workplaces in Australia, "We found that the characteristics that underpin an excellent workplace are identifiable, quantifiable, and manageable. Of the 15 key drivers, the number one driver is the quality of working relationships. People relating to each other as friends, colleagues, and co-workers, supporting each other, and helping to get the job done. Structure and culture may eat strategy for breakfast, but networks are the key to how employees make things work in spite of the system. The knowledge of how to get things done and together with the effective intra- and interdepartment relationships are key to making things happen, and as such a value asset to an organisation. The next big subset of human capital is employee engagement. This has become so important to organisations around the world, and research has shown that a strong link between productivity and employee engagement. There seems to be little doubt that engaged employees drive bottom-line performance. A survey of over 360,000 employees from 41 companies in the world's 10 largest economies examined the relationship between different levels of employee engagement and corporate financial performance, measured by change in operating margin and change in net profit margin. Comparing high engagement to low engagement companies over a 3-year period, the differences were substantial, as shown in the diagram on your screen. In fact, it provides a compelling argument for the developing and maintaining an engaged workforce. The ISR, in its paper Engaged Employees Drive Bottom-Line Performance, notes that employee engagement is actually a measure of the combination of 3 components: think, feel, act. This is where the cognitive or think component relates to the employee's logical evaluation of a company's goals and values. The emotional affective component, or feel, taps into whether employees have a sense of belonging and pride in the company. Finally, the behavioural dimension, or act, captures the outcomes that employers desire, such as retention and willingness to go the extra distance for the company when necessary. A number of research studies have clearly found a real value of employee engagement. For example, a survey conducted by Hewitt Associates found that employee engagement levels are more than 20% higher at double-digit growth companies than at lower growth companies, according to a survey of 4 million employees. The Towers Perrin report found that only half, or 50% of employees polled, said their company inspires them to do their best work, suggesting companies are performing below their potential because they are not engaging their employees. A brief summary of other relevant research shows that only between 11 and 20% of an organisation's staff are fully committed to their organisation and have a strong emotional commitment to their job, team, and managers. Some 60% plus of staff are only moderately committed, and a frightening 19 to 25% are disaffected or disengaged. Put put in minimal effort or may even be actively working against the organisation. Moving from low to high effort in employee performance can improve performance by 20%. Moving from strong disengagement to strong engagement, decrease the probability of departure by 87%. Moving staff from strong non-commitment to strong commitment can result in a 57% increase in discretionary effort. For every 10% improvement in employee commitment, employees will increase their discretionary effort by 2%, resulting in a 2% increase in bottom line. A study of 2,000 companies from 1999 to 2003 has shown the dramatic bottom line effect for shareholder return. Organisations with 49% of employees of strong levels of engagement had an average shareholder return of 20.2%. 49 to 60% of employees with only moderate levels of engagement had an average shareholder return of 5.6%. And less than 40% engaged had an average negative shareholder return of 9.6%. Now let's look at the final two components of human capital, that is ethical capital and workforce diversity. Ethical capital is the quantum of integrity of its workforce. It comprises demonstrated ethical behaviour and decision making and is critically important for line managers and supervisors if they're to lead engaged and productive work teams. Australian research conducted by the Independent Commission Against Corruption found that the ethical tone of an organisation impacts on efficiency and effectiveness, decision-making processes, staff commitment and job satisfaction, and staff stress and staff turnover. The research also determined that strong, clearly stated values could guide people through choices, so that making ethical decisions was the path of least resistance. The bottom line from this research was that ethical practices can optimise the efficient functioning of an organisation. Ethics are good business. The 2007 ERC National Business Ethics Survey found that 4 elements were required to shape ethical culture: ethical leadership, supervisor reinforcement, peer commitment to ethics, and embedded ethical values. And the last component of human capital is workforce diversity. Diversity embodies all the differences that make us unique individuals, not limited to physical aspects of race and ethnicity, gender, age, disability, and sexual orientation. It includes culture, religion, education, experience, opinions, beliefs, language, nationality, and more. Many would argue, myself included, that diversity is what has made Australia strong and referred to as the lucky country. Since the end of the Second World War, Australia has had a vibrant migration program, and migrations from around the world have settled in Australia, and in doing so have contributed enormously to both our social fabric and the Australian workplace. Diversity represents the ultimate source of competitive advantage. Okay, so we've briefly covered the key components of human capital. However, before we close this tutorial, we need to briefly consider a couple of other intangible forms of organisational capital, as they will impact on you as a frontline manager or supervisor and the skills and knowledge you need to engage and motivate your staff to high performance. Brand awareness is a marketing concept that refers to a consumer knowing of a brand's existence. It is a measure or indication of the readiness or likelihood with which a brand springs to mind and thought of and recognised favourably. The logic is that the more a brand is known and thought of favourably, the more likely customers are to purchase compared to lesser or unknown products. Brand awareness is one of the considerations taken into account when determining organisational goodwill, and an essential enabling tool to improve workforce motivation, productivity, and reduce waste is line of sight. As you can see from the diagram on your screen, the organisation line of sight informs budget and resourcing, and for the employee articulates key result areas, KRAs, and their associated key performance indicators, KPIs. In summary then, people are the key to the successful implementation of strategy. In order to effectively execute strategy, an organisation must allocate and align its human resources with its vision, goals, and strategies. As you can see, and you as the frontline manager or supervisor play a crucial role in this. As you work through the tutorials in this program, you'll find lots of suggestions for strategies and approaches to engage with and care for your employees so that you can increase work performance performance and overall productivity in the organisation. And just in case you're still not quite convinced, let's look at a hypothetical for you to think about. Say your average employee costs $50,000 per annum, including on costs, and they stay with you for 3 years. Over 3 years, that's a cost of $150,000. Staying with the hypothetical now, say you apply an average of 3 to 5 times productivity factor to the wages. Then over the 3 years, you would be expecting a minimum of $450,000 worth of productivity from the person. Now think about this. You would reasonably expect then a manager entrusted with an asset that would generate $450,000 over 3 years would take a very keen interest in how the asset was performing, see that it was regularly serviced, and would take prompt remedial action if the asset started to malfunction. That surely would be quite a reasonable expectation an organisation would have of its managers. But in practice, it just doesn't happen. Why? It is only since the late 80s that organisations have started to realise the value of their employees and developed systems to support their valuable assets. Organisations have instituted performance management systems to assist managers perform the 3 tasks I just mentioned. That is, to develop performance goals or objectives, review and monitor the performance against said goals or objectives, and action problems. How well does your performance management system work? Is it able to look after, manage, and get the very best performance out of its people? Employee engagement and job satisfaction should not be something that you measure once a year. In a 2012 survey conducted by SHRM, it was found that 2 of the top 5 contributors to employee satisfaction were relationship with immediate supervisor and communication between employees and senior management. These 2 aspects were also high on employees' list of engagement aspects. Clearly, employees value their relationship with management, and they are looking for ways to make this relationship more effective, which in turn will increase employee satisfaction, engagement, and productivity. Line managers need to better understand the organisation's vision and share it with their direct reports. The relationship an employee has with his or her supervisor or line manager is a central element to the employee's affiliation to the organisation, and it has been argued that many employee behaviours are largely a function of the way they are managed by their supervisors. One of the components of a good relationship is effective communication. When there are open lines of communication, for example, encouraging an open door policy, supervisors can respond more effectively to the needs and problems of their employees. Effective communication from senior management can provide the workforce with direction. In addition, management's recognition of employees' performance through praise, private or public, awards and incentives is a cost-effective way of increasing employee morale, productivity, and competitiveness. The relationship employees have with their supervisors is directly connected to their success and growth at work. Supervisors who develop a positive relationship with employees may be more likely to learn their employees' strengths and weaknesses, making it easier for supervisors to use their employees' talents for the good of the organisation. Employees who have a favourable relationship with their supervisors, a relationship in which they feel safe and supported, may be more likely to go above and beyond what is required of them. They also may share with their supervisor job-related problems or even personal problems, which can be barriers to employee productivity. This same survey showed that employees may feel more committed to their organisation if they believe that their efforts are valued. More than half, 57% of employees reported that they were satisfied with management's recognition of employee job performance. Acknowledging and rewarding employees' job performance is important. Equally important are the behaviours that management rewards, which manifest the norms and culture across the organisation. Let me give you an example to ponder in your own company. Is management rewarding competition instead of teamwork? Are managers that retain top performers recognised? Does the organisation reward employees who adhere to organisational values and ethics over those who do not? You can complete this activity at the end of this tutorial if you wish. Now let's finish off for today with a short summary. Remember that only 35% of all full-time workers are highly engaged. This means that up to 2/3 of your workforce, as much as 65% of your team or department, are either not fully engaged or are actively disengaged. That is, they are not working to maximum productivity. A third of Australia's workforce falls below the national productivity average, costing businesses up to $41.3 billion every year. Only 23% of Australia's workforce is highly productive. And only half of Australia's 11.5 million employees believe they are even in the right line of work. So there seems to be little doubt that your workforce or team is likewise disengaged and demotivated, and so not working at the productivity rate they are capable of. This, of course, affects the bottom line for your company, and it is so serious that it can even put your company out of business unless it is addressed. To address the problem of decreasing productivity, supervisors and line managers need to sharpen up their skills. They need to understand strategy and the business goals of their organisation, and they need to be able to share these with their staff to engage and motivate them to increase their work performance. To do this, frontline managers and supervisors must be able to lead with integrity and ethical behaviour in a culture of trust and support. Develop and build effective workplace relationships. Match their personal values with the organisation. Set personal career goals. Plan and manage the day-to-day workload. Communicate effectively at all levels in the organisation and with their direct reports, and give and receive feedback to encourage increased productivity. Support and manage their teams and the individuals within them for high performance. Set performance goals and provide effective feedback to motivate staff to improve their performance. Conduct effective, efficient performance review and appraisal meetings with staff. Recognise and reward exceptional performance and effectively manage poor performance. And finally, you must be able to recognise the importance of employee engagement and the critical role you play as the frontline manager in building and maintaining a high level of engagement in an organisation with a strong and congruent brand identity with an employer of choice approach. This program will give you the knowledge, skills and tools to do all this and more over the next 15 hours or so. See you next time.